time to start the conversation. It's time for an unauthorized caucus.
It's caucus time.
I should have known that you were going to do that. Here we are. It's been a couple of weeks since we've had just you and me, because we had Mr. Kevin Shipp on with us last week. That was a good one, man. I enjoyed it. What a cool story. Neat to hear from him. But hey, welcome in everybody. It's caucus time. You already heard it there from Mason. And we've got a big topic today. We might not spend an entire ton of amount of time, but we're going to stay focused on one primary topic today because it's a big deal. I mean, this is the big deal of maybe the entire Trump second administration. We'll see. He's picked enough fights. I wondered when we would have one of the big cataclysmic constitution changing fights happen. And I think we've found it, at least the first one. There's probably going to be more, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. Housekeeping first. Welcome on in. It's Unauthorized Caucus. This week's episode is going to have some fun links. Make sure you go over to unauthorizedcaucus.com. You'll find all of the links there. That's our Substack page. You can sign up for the email list, so you'll get it straight to you. And then, of course, wherever you are, we would appreciate your support. Make sure you sign up there so that you can get all the notifications, get the links, but also for all of our podcast listeners, 5-star rating and review. Appreciate it so much. That would be very helpful. If you're one of the Rumble viewers, I'd love for you to give us a like and a follow. Share this link out. If it's a podcast, you take a screenshot, share it on social media. You can tag us. We're on Facebook and X. Or if you're just scooting around on Rumble, you can send that link to someone else. Let them know what you're listening to, why these conversations matter. That's what we're here to do, is start the conversation. So that's the pitch that I have for you. But of course, I want to make sure that you support the people who support us. So go to trexinc.com. That's one of our great sponsors. In fact, let me throw it up on the screen here. trexinc.com. You'll find all kinds of cool swag. They have apparel. They've got mugs, caps. I think there's probably other stuff coming down the pike for them. But if you go over there, use the code CAUCUS30. That will let them know that you came from here. Let them know that they are doing good work supporting Unauthorized Caucus. Also, you'll get something cool out of it, a big discount on some really neat stuff. You see there, their Christmas sweater is still popular. And I tell you what, we're on the countdown to Christmas 2025. So you might as well go ahead and get in on that over at trexinc.com. But say thanks to our sponsor. Today, Mason, we are going to the battle of the branches, the battle of the Constitution. We've been saying for some time now, we are not under a constitutional republic any longer. At least it's not been functioning that way for a while. We've been functioning as an administrative state. That's what I wanted Donald Trump to come in and deal with. Break up the administrative state so that we can return to some sort of a semblance of the Constitution. That's what's needed. Well, another branch has decided to have something to say about that. Yep. Haven't they now?
Apparently it's unconstitutional to return to the Constitution.
That's about the bottom line. It's unconstitutional to return to the Constitution. Bottom line, folks, if you're not familiar what we're talking about, in the last couple of weeks, we have had so many restraining orders, injunctions, blocks, all kinds of stuff from almost every level of the federal courts. I'm trying to think if there's been appeals. I know that federal district judges have had a field day.
There have been some appeals.
Everything, but there have been some appeals, and we've even had some stuff at the Supreme Court already. Although that one was really just punting it back down a level to the they remanded it to the court below them.
I'm counting at least 2.
Is it 2?
Gone to the Supreme Court.
Well, and that's the thing is there is not a big definitive list because this stuff is happening so quickly. It's hard to track it. But what is happening is the Trump response, which is essentially, I don't care.
Well, the New York Times has a pretty decent definitive list.
Is it? Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, that link will be in the show notes.
That link will be in the show notes. But there's a lot. I've got a bunch in front of me today, and that's the thing. Is the conversation today is almost more about the response to it than the actual number of injunctions or orders against the Trump administration and actually the content of them. So there's a lot of interesting stuff going on, but the Supreme Court is involved now in more ways than one. Now, let me see if I can set the stage here, and then Mason, I want you to jump in with your high level view. Bottom line, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but I want to say, folks, if you're just catching up with this, with us, the DOGE firings of, well, I should say DOGE, the White House firings of agency staff and the wholesale roll up of agencies like USAID. They've gone through and started slashing and burning a bunch of other folks from different agencies. That started to face some injunctions from courts because, of course, there were lawsuits. The ACLU came in, a bunch of unions came in. There shouldn't be public sector unions at all. Sorry, if you're a public sector taxpayer paid employee, I don't think you have the right to collective bargaining, period. But that's almost a whole topic in and of itself. But all these folks came in, and what happened was a bunch of judges started saying, no, you can't do that. No, you can't fire those people. No, you can't remove a bunch of USAID workers. And that kind of set the stage for this stuff to go. Tons of that. And the White House didn't really acquiesce. It just kind of was floating along in Never Never Land. We were waiting to see what would happen. But then, interestingly enough, what did happen is Trump decided to deport criminal aliens of all shocking things. Oh my goodness, criminal aliens. Yeah, Trump decided to deport criminal aliens, and that was the last straw. Federal judges took so much offense at defending the non-existent due process rights of non-citizens that do not owe their sovereignty, allegiance, or anything to the United States of America, that they decided that was the place to put their foot in the sand when Donald Trump invoked the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 and said, I can deport non-citizens without restriction because this is wartime. And I don't think that any of us would argue that the invasion at our southern border, what the Biden administration has done the last 4 years before now, has essentially been some sort of warfare against the United States, economically, in terms of national security. But that was the moment when a federal judge and then a bunch of others that it set off. And this was the judge was, hold on, what was his name? This was federal district judge. I've pronounced it a couple of different ways. Boasberg. I've not actually ever heard it said, but I've read it enough. Judge Boasberg, the federal district judge, his order was, no, that plane that took off with 230 or 250 Tren de Aragua and MS-13 gang members that's headed to Supermax security prisons in El Salvador, where some of these folks came from. The rest of them are thugs of Maduro out of Venezuela. No, that plane has to turn around. You can't deport those people. And the Trump folks that weekend go, it's an international airways. I don't know what you want me to do about it. Can't make it turn around. Sorry. Yep. And then all hell broke loose. And we have been fighting and yelling about the Constitution, and the judicial supremacists have poked their heads up in a brand new way. Mason, what am I missing? What are your top lines? Because if that's, I feel like that's about the shortest version. If someone wants to know kind of the sequence of events, that's where we got. It is from there to here where we are now, and then we can kind of go into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, one top line that's very important to add to that case specifically is the Supreme Court decision Ludecky v. Watkins in 1948 held, number one, the Alien Enemy Act precludes judicial review of the removal order. They have no business being involved in this whatsoever. The Supreme Court has already decided on this. And I mean, and it's just like genuinely insane anyway that the courts are right. Like, actually, like that's what frustrates me so much. That it's like, who are these people? These are federal judges. I mean, you know, a federal judge is like, you know, pretty up there, but also like, come on, you're telling the president, you know, that he can't deport people according to an act that was passed by Congress that gives him the authority to deport people, and specifically the way he's doing it, or like saying, oh, the Office of Personnel Management doesn't have authority to recommend to fire people. It's like, okay, what does the Office of Personnel Management manage, if not the personnel in the government? It's like
no, the name.
No, it doesn't have that authority. And I'm like, wait, so what authority does it have? Like, and there are so many of these, and there have already been more temporary restraining orders and preliminary injunctions in the 2 months of Trump's presidency than there were over the entire course of Biden's presidency. They are not messing around here, and that means Trump can't mess around either, because this is because, like you said, this might be the thing of the Trump presidency if this cripples the Trump presidency, because it could. Like, if these judges keep going and there's not a check on their power, they're going to get increasingly emboldened, and anything that Trump does, every judge is just going to want to, oh, stop it, don't do that, over and over again. And so this has the potential to be the downfall of the second Trump administration. And I think it's so critical that Trump, continues along with what he's doing with the deportations right now, of like, well, not going to do that. And it needs to be more explicitly, I'm not going to do that. Like, you have no power here type thing. Like the possibly fake Andrew Jackson quote that rings true of, just Chief Justice Marshall has made his decision. Now let him enforce it.
Yeah.
Okay, like, let's see who has the bigger guns on their side. This federal judge somewhere in California, or the president of the United States. Like, when we get down to brass tacks, whose authority is higher? And kind of the point of the separation of powers is that, like, they're not higher, they're different. But okay, when they're directly conflicting on this, like, Trump and the Trump administration need to say, no, this government is a mess. We are making decisions, and we do not care what you have to say about it. They need to declare a state of exception.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And that's, bottom line, what we are, we are about to have the big discussion, the big kahuna over what checks and balances, separation of powers looks like. Because that's the thing. The executive branch can run amok, and theoretically what Congress can do is say, okay, but we're not going to fund that. And then, the courts can interpret the laws, and that, sets down precedent for how lower courts are going to handle things. But if they do something, that's where it's like, okay, but you and what enforcement agency? We are the enforcement agencies, Article 1 executive branch says. So the whole point is that they really can check each other. Now, in general, we haven't just seen, at least in recent times, we haven't seen a lot of refusal, just outright refusal, but we're there. We're at the time. And honestly, the beautiful thing about all of this, actually, to your point, I was going to bring up Ledecky and Watkins as well. We have the same notes. Imagine that. We've got the same notes. But that's later on from the same decision, I saw full responsibility. They say, this is, again, the Supreme Court has already said this, like Mason said, full responsibility for the just exercise of this great power, the Alien Enemy Act, deportations, may validly be left where the Congress has constitutionally placed it on the President of the United States. Period. Full stop. That's already been decided. So for the Supreme Court to go a different direction is now basically going to be just a radical change, a break in precedent that they're not going to be able to explain without some sort of political answer. It's really interesting. By the way, the number of injunctions alone, it is interesting in one thing. Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary, actually quantified it for everyone. I think this was yesterday, sometime earlier this week. She said over the last century, over 2/3, more than 66% of all injunctions imposed against presidents have been against Donald Trump. And then 92% of those have been from judges that were appointed by Democrats. So her words, they're not judges, they're activists.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, they are. And that's really what we're talking about, folks, is this. If you're looking on the screen, I hold here in my hands a copy of Phyllis Schlafly's book, The Supremacists. And 20 years ago, she wrote this in 2004, and then a reissue in 2006, revised and expanded. 20 years ago, her complaint, the complaint of conservatives, was that radical judicial activists were behaving as if they were lawmakers. They were legislating from the bench and taking on a position that constitutionally is not theirs. And she goes down. Judges rewrite the Constitution, censor acknowledgement of God, redefine marriage, undermine sovereignty, threaten property rights, promote pornography, foster feminism. It goes on and on. And it's stuff that is usurping Article 2. Article 3 saying Article 2 doesn't need to be here. No more lawmakers. We'll take care of that. Well, now, 20 years later, they're coming for Article 1. Well, you can't enforce that. We say so. You and what army? Whether or not it was a Jackson direct quote, it is. They've made their decision. Now let them enforce it.
Mhm.
That's where we're at. And and I've seen a lot of people, the three branches of government are supposed to be equal in power, not one branch controlling the other. Not equal, separate. I would say separate in power. This is why they were each given specific roles.
We got rid of separate but equal a long time ago. In a different context, but once the principle's gone, the principle is gone.
Yeah. So this is interesting. Now, one thing that did catch my attention is in the middle of all of this. And oh, by the way, folks, just in case, we will include this big New York Times article, but I'll send you the archived version that does not have a paywall, because I would never, ever in my wildest dreams ask you to give even $1 to the Slimes. The New York Slimes can keep their money. But the interesting thing is, the Supreme Court has come into the equation twice that I'm aware of. And you correct me, Mason, if I'm wrong. But first of all, once they sided, three times I can say. Once they sided with the administration, and at least once against it, maybe another time. I'm trying to see exactly what it was, because I don't know if we count remanding it. But basically, in the first major ruling, you remember the continuation of contracts that a lower court judge said, no, USAID contracts, you have to pay them out. You must pay them. You can't cancel them. The Supreme Court upheld it, but really what they did was they didn't decide on the merit. They remanded to the lower court ruling. Basically, they said that goes, but they didn't decide, and that was 5-4. And the really fun part about that is the dissent was absolutely scathing. Was it Sam Alito wrote the dissent on this and was joined by Clarence Thomas, Neil Gorsuch, and Brett Kavanaugh. And their dissent was pretty scathing. Let me have it here. Just the first paragraph. I want you to hear it. And you hear this court. If we can get any of the five, squishy Amy Coney Barrett, compromised John Roberts, or the three radical libs, if we can get any of the five of them gone, we add a fifth to this majority. Think about it. Justice Alito writes, Thomas, Kavanaugh, Gorsuch agreeing, does a single district court judge who likely lacks jurisdiction have the unchecked power to compel the government of the United States to pay out and probably lose forever $2 billion taxpayer dollars? The answer to that question should be an emphatic no. But a majority of this court apparently thinks otherwise. I am stunned. I don't think I've ever read language like this in a dissent or in any opinion from the Supreme Court. This is Alito. Alito is big mad. I mean, big mad, and rightly so. It's flabbergasting to see them step in. But the other part, the second part of this, not just Supreme Court actually weighing decisions. After the Alien Enemies Act thing flared up, immediately there were moves to calls for impeaching this federal judge, who really has gone outside his purview, I believe, because that's almost a whole separate conversation in and of itself. But is a district court judge allowed to lay down an injunction the nation over at the highest level of stuff and stop the presidency, or is he responsible over his jurisdiction? Because what this is court picking. The ACLU and the federal employees unions and the bleeding heart, don't deport the rapists organizations, they know where to go to get a judge to agree with them. They don't just go where maybe strictly speaking would go. They go where they know they can get the answer they want. But Congressman Brandon Gill from Texas's 26th district, he actually introduced articles of impeachment against this radical activist, Judge James Boasberg, and said he's guilty of high crimes and misdemeanors. He should be removed from office. This isn't his job. Well, President Trump actually tweeted out something about, the radical judge should be impeached. And, Trump puts up lots of things on Truth Social. but rarely do we get public statements of a similar kind from any one member of the Supreme Court, and we did. Chief Justice John Roberts issued a public statement all on his own, and his comment was, for more than 2 centuries, it has been established that impeachment is not an appropriate response to the disagreement concerning a judicial decision. The normal appellate review process exists for that purpose.
He should impeach John Roberts.
Yeah.
Just turn around and do that.
And here's the thing. What the left is arguing is by ignoring the federal courts, Donald Trump is destroying the judiciary's legitimacy in America. I'm here to put down the opinion. The only person I see destroying the judicial legitimacy other than these federal judges is Chief Justice John Roberts. I find it embarrassing, and whatever attempt at preservation of judicial legitimacy, I mean, he's destroying judiciary's credibility with the American people right now. Because this president was elected by us to do literally this thing. This is one of the most important things that won him a majority. And it's not just a pure democracy exercise, because this isn't just, oh, well, the majority's decided to stone people with red hair. No, that it's not arbitrary. This is a very long-standing precedent. Foreign enemies invaded the nation. The president is allowed to deport them. They don't even belong here. They don't have an allegiance to this country. They don't have the due process rights of an American citizen. If he were deporting American citizens, I'd be the first one in line to go, whoa, 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 pause. You don't get to do that. Like, there's a process for that. And it's
I
not
don't know.
just
There's some American citizens I'd be okay with him just hitting the deport button on. I did promise a lot of libtards on Twitter that they were going to get deported to the moon. And Trump really needs to pull through on that. Otherwise, I'm going to be in an awkward situation.
Well, you got to colonize Mars somehow. I mean, if you don't have willing volunteers. I'm kidding. Kind of. But no, I mean, John Roberts put himself squarely in the middle of America's political discourse. He's in the hot seat, and for good reason. I mean, I think it was Sean Fleetwood over at the Federalist said judicial jihad is what we're witnessing right now. Judicial jihad against the executive branch. Because that's the reality. At every point, this goes back to the question that we had, and we've talked about a few times in the last few weeks, unitary executive theory. Is he the executive of the nation, the executive over the executive branch, or not? Yes or no? And it's not more complicated than that. I mean, you might get to some nuance in a few of these discussions, but the answer to that question should be yes or no. And then you discuss the limits. Okay. Now, what are the limits and where are there limitations, if any? But the problem is we're not arguing over those extraneous limitations. We're having right now the fundamental argument, is he the executive or not? Yeah. Does he get to fire executive employees? That's the one that burns my biscuit just as much as the deportations of alien criminal enemies. I mean, guess what? The chief executive says you're fired. Like, he can fire you.
Yeah. I don't know what's more just blatantly cut and dry. And like, I mean, because the alien enemies thing, it's like he has that power. It's laid out by Congress, but with like within the administration, you know, cutting the administration, dealing with the departments that are part of the executive branch, like that's fully within his power.
Right.
It's fully within his power.
And it's not even like you could make the case that it falls under some sort of discriminatory. Well, we're going to fire everyone with black hair. We're going to fire everyone with yellow skin. Like, no. Hey, we're $36 trillion in debt. Your entire department is getting cut because we literally can't afford it. I'm so sorry. Go find
and
a better
because you
job.
do nothing. And
this is all merit based. This is all bottom dollar. And I mean, I don't think that any of these folks, if this were just a massive corporation going through layoffs, necessary layoffs to avoid bankruptcy or something, I mean, in today's judicial climate, these folks could probably find some sort of civil suit for discrimination. But in reality, in truth, you know, and I know, and all the folks watching know, there's no discrimination to be found here. This is just the bald-faced reality of being $36 freaking trillion in debt. You're gonna have to, you know, if Dave Ramsey were here, he'd remind you, rice and beans. It ain't pleasant. It's just what has to be done to avoid dying.
Yep. And I think it was when Aaron McIntyre joined us that he talked about how the left is really good at building up their power. When they're in power, they entrench their power, and when the right is in power, they reduce their power. And what we're feeling is the effect of that right now. Like what happens when Trump is trying to, exercise power in the government, and it comes up against the entire system that they've set up to defend themselves. Because when you think about it, if Trump does not have authority over these departments in the executive branch, that's really putting the cart before the horse. That's saying, okay, these aspects of the executive branch, these departments that are supposed to be underneath the president, are actually above the president, and the president does not have authority over them. And that's like saying that, like, oh, the Supreme Court has to answer to some lower court. Like, that's the exact same thing. It's saying that, it's nonsense. That's what it is. But if we do that, then the deep state is just even more entrenched. If all these ridiculous, like, because that's how it's been going. It's all these departments get set up. Like, there was that executive order over the weekend that Trump was dissolving, I think, 8 federal agencies. I hadn't even heard of 7 of them. I was like, what? These are here, but with if the courts win in this, and if the judicial branch says no, the president does not have power over these, that means that once these are established, they cannot ever be broken up by. And then who can break them up? Congress? I mean, it's the executive branch. I guess Congress could stop funding them, but also, like, that is the actual responsibility of the Office of Management and Budget to determine how the money is allocated. They don't get to decide how much money there is. That's Congress's job. They have the power of the purse, but OMB gets to decide on the apportionments. This is within the executive branch. That authority already exists there. So it's frankly preposterous that Trump has to answer to, or is constrained in some way from dealing with these, from dealing with, like, his direct subjects within his department of government that he is the supreme head over.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, those agencies, I'm looking at the list here. This is from March 14. No one has ever heard. Okay, you may have heard of the United States Agency for Global Media. This is, of course, Voice of America, VOA, which he put Carrie Lake in charge of. And I saw VOA. She's still the nominee, but Voice of America nominated leader Carrie Lake told staff on Saturday after this, you check your emails immediately. And it's because Donald Trump signed this order that slates, what do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 for elimination. Tell me if you've ever heard of any of these folks. The Federal Mediation and Conciliation Service, the United States Agency for Global Media, the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars, and the Smithsonian Institution, the Institute of Museum and Library Services. I may have heard of that one before. The United States Interagency Council on Homelessness. That's obviously working really well. The Community Development Financial Institutions Fund, and the Minority Business Development Agency.
I've heard of that last one.
Well, a lot of the minority business owners didn't vote for whoever's in charge of that the last 4 years. So they voted for the guy who just decided to roll it up.
Yep.
If we're going by the demographics of the 2024 November election, within 7 days of this order, the head of each entity listed shall submit a report to the director of OMB confirming full compliance with this order and explaining which components or functions of the entity, if any, are statutorily required and to what extent. I mean, this is great stuff. This is what we sent him there to do. Mm-hmm. Why is that even here? Why it really is. It's office based. Tell me what you think you do here. Would you tell me what it is that you do here?
Right.
We've got so much of that, and so many employees. By the way, on the chopping block, which we are waiting for with bated breath, is the education department. That is supposed to drop today. Mm-hmm. So we can't really speak to that because we know it's coming. They've been talking about it, and obviously they're going to need an act of Congress to officially roll it up because an act of Congress created it in 1979. But I mean, they're moving to roll up the federal, Department of Education, and in the meantime, they're going to cut half of the 4,000 staff that are there. So I mean, this is fantastic. They're moving through and doing exactly what we asked them to do: get rid of wokeness, purge wokeness, move through. But Here's what it boils down to for me. I mean, the more we see, and we could go just story after story. Tom Homan's mad about judges defying logic. The federal judge blocking, they ruled in favor of some of the transgender identifying people from military service, trying to block Trump's order against them, barring them from military service. We could go on and on and on. But the interesting question at the base here is twofold. We've talked about the one, the actual question of executive theory, and does Article 3 have the ability to just tell Article 1 and Article 2 what to do and replace them? No, it doesn't. But here's another interesting question. Federal courts and their constitutional legitimacy at all. Because Article 3 of the Constitution did a couple of things. It grants judicial power to the Supreme Court. But according to my understanding of Article 3, which isn't that long to read, go and read it, it allowed Congress to create lower courts. So this, I haven't even gotten a chance to go into all of this, but I want to, is to see what framework was created by Congress, and can Congress roll up when it comes to the federal judiciary? Because that's obviously changed a lot since, 1789. Now, some of it necessary. We didn't have 350 million people and 50 states and the entire continent sea to sea. Like, obviously that comes with a bigger judicial infrastructure. Of course, that makes sense. However, you look at it and say, well, hold on, how much has been leached from the states to federal courts that really don't belong in federal courts? What actually has to do with the federal government? And as Trump is paring down what the federal government does, rolling up regulatory agencies, I don't see why we shouldn't be rolling up federal judges and judiciaries as well. Some of those benches, I think, need to disappear because they don't really need to be there. And technically, they're not constitutionally protected. They are congressionally created and protected. Am I getting a right read on that according to your understanding of how Article 3 works with federal courts?
Yeah, but I haven't really looked into how the federal courts were established themselves by Congress. I mean, obviously they were, but when, how, I don't know.
Right. And see, that's the thing. Now we're talking about almost 250 years of growth and change, because I understand the beginning, how it was set down, and I understand where we are now. But that's why I say, like, I hate to tease something that I haven't quite researched, but that is, like, I haven't found someone who has summarized that for me completely reliably yet, though I know people are working on it, because that question is now being asked. So that's, this is caucus. We are here to ask the questions. I'm asking that one. We're going to have to take a look at this, and we're going to be on the lookout, folks. We may start throwing up this year, because we've got more interviews coming and different things. We may start throwing up some little non-episode things in between, whether it's written or it's video or audio or just one of the things, where we're going to try to bring you some quicker hits on this, but go into something. Because again, let us be, don't trust AI. Let us be your AI. You come to us and we'll give you a little summary of something that maybe you see snippets of. That's what we hope to be able to do here. And then also sometimes just go all the way down the rabbit hole, like we did last week with Kevin Shipp. But that's one that I want to look at. I need to see a full section, because Article 3 is really short. There's 3 sections. And basically, I mean, it says that, the judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court and in such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. The judges, both of the Supreme and inferior courts, shall hold their offices during good behavior and shall at stated times receive for their services a compensation, which shall not be diminished during their continuance in office. That's it. That's all it says. That is the Constitution. That is all it says about lower courts outside of the Supreme Court. And I mean, when this was first created, 1789, 1790, the Supreme Court had to take every case that came to them. I think they didn't get a chance to pick and choose like they do now, but also it was a very small nation and the government was very small at the federal level. There weren't as many things to take on and decide. So we're in a very interesting mess. This is a good time. Here's your homework assignment from me. Go pick up a copy of the Federalist Papers. Something like, hold on, where'd it go? Something like this. Just a little bitty paperback I've got in my hands here. It looks like a novel. It doesn't exactly read as fast as a novel, but you laugh. Stop laughing, Mason. But this is the Bantam version, and it is only, let me see. After all the documents, We've got are there 85? Yeah, 85 Federalist Papers. This is only 538 pages long.
Oh, only 538 pages.
Shut up. You can handle this, folks. You really can. They're everywhere. I've got old copies behind me on my shelf. I've got this one that I touch. You can see can you see, Mason? My spine is nice and beat up.
I can see it's,
yeah, because you want to know, well, the Constitution only says, and the men who wrote it wrote a lot of other stuff contemporaneously in their time. There is no question what their intent was. I may not be a federal judge, but I can figure out original intent because I've got it here in my hands. Get a copy of these, by the way, so that you own it and the internet doesn't. Own copies of all the founding documents, own copies of the letters that they wrote, of the things that they wrote aside. And also, you go to phyllisschlafly.com and pick up a copy of The Supremacists, and you'll see some of Phyllis Schlafly's game plan on how to beat back these ninnies. I wish these were hardback books. I could have had much more lovely effect slamming them down on my desk. These are grave constitutional questions. And we're in the thick of it now. Mm-hmm. So I'm sorry, folks. I feel like we might be repeating ourselves on some of this because we are banging the unitary executive drum here. But this is it. This is the show. It's not just, is a president allowed to fire people? Now we've gotten to, is the judiciary allowed to tell the executive what they can and cannot execute? Mm-hmm. And I am flabbergasted. No, I'm stunned. I'll take Justice Alito's word. I am stunned at the response of the society. Like, this is wild to me. I guess it shouldn't surprise me. You know, conservatives don't like what a company does. They stop buying that beer. And then when the left doesn't like what some company's leader does, they turn into like ISIS, domestic terrorists, and start blowing up car dealerships. I mean, I guess I shouldn't be surprised, but there you go. Mason, what else you got? That's
all I got.
Okay, folks, we're going to leave it a little shorter today on this one issue because I've handed you a few things. There's your homework. I want you to go and here's your homework. Read the Constitution, Articles 1, 2, and 3 especially. Read the Constitution. Go and find yourself a copy of the Federalist Papers. There are a few that I think you really do want to read. Federalist number 70 is an important one. There you're going to find Alexander Hamilton talking about the energetic executive. That's a big one that I think is important to read. You're going to find quite a few others as well. John Jay wrote some of the earlier ones. I think it was number 3, the Articles of Confederation Inadequate for Defense. You'll find some interesting stuff in there. But I mean, these are the words of John Jay, Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, the spirit of the Constitution. You want to talk about the separation of powers? Here it is. James Madison argued in 47 and 48 that the separation is not absolute. You want to find out what all those mean, go get a copy of the Federalist Papers. You can get the Anti-Federalist Papers too. I have that on my desk as well. I just don't use it nearly as much. But there is an incredible wealth of knowledge out there because we are asking some incredible constitutional questions right now. You and I voted for this. This is what we voted for, not just for Trump to deport everyone. You and I voted for the Constitution to be renewed and restored as we go back into reforging Western civilization, which is what we're doing right now, I think. So there's your homework. Get a copy of the Constitution, get a copy of the Federalist Papers, dive in with us to Articles 1, 2, and 3, Federalist number 70, and a few of the others as we discuss what is and isn't allowed here. But this is wild stuff. We will continue to talk about this as it unfolds because each one of these comes back to a very big question, and there's a lot of specifics with it. So we're going to do our best to kind of stick on it with you as we march through some other guests and topics this year. This is the big one, at least for the first half of Trump 47. Mm-hmm. So, all right. I think that's it for us today. Be reminded, go over to trexinc.com. Say thanks to our sponsor. Use the promo code caucus30. I have my lovely little Join the Revolution mug. It feels more revolution-y than ever now. And I'm glad to have that. So head on over there, trexinc.com. Let them know that you heard about them here on Unauthorized Caucus. And we got a lot more. We got a lot more coming down the pike. We have a few things brewing in the hopper. So make sure you're over at unauthorizedcaucus.com. Signed up for all the goodies. Like and share on social media. You'll find us on X and Facebook. And of course, 5-star rating and review for our podcast, folks. Appreciate it so much. That will go a very long way to helping. But there you go. That's the biggie. The judges are coming for everything. The judges are taking over.
Mm-hmm.
All right. That's it for us this week. Folks, we'll talk to you next week. It'll be another week, another whatever day it is that this episode drops. And then it'll be Mason.
Caucus time.
Caucus time. All right. Thanks, folks.